Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Haunted Vermont podcast. My name is Paul Doski, and joining me, well, this is going to be a little confusing, I think, but for when it comes to the crypto, the paranormal, the UFO stuff, I mean, I can't think of a better guy that has been in this field for pretty much 50 years or so, but let's welcome our special guest, Paul Bartholomew. Paul, welcome to, Haunted Vermont.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and did I get that right, by the way? You've been in this field for 50 years?
Yeah. It seems like like the 1973 flap, one of the major flaps in this region. It seems like that was yesterday for me sometimes, and you realize that's like 50 years ago.
That's so crazy. So, Paul, just for people that may not know you, because I know besides you actually doing some of this stuff like for the paranormal, but you also do your own books and stuff with your brother and this and that. But I guess real quick, I guess in a nutshell maybe, because I mean 50 years is a lot. But anyway, I guess what I want to ask you is, so what really got you into the paranormal to make you want to investigate yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always had an interest in unusual phenomena, whether it be stories of monsters or ghosts or UFOs or whatever. But back in 1973, there was a major UFO flap in this region. And, obviously a flap is when there's a large number of sightings over a short amount of time. And in October of 73, it started, and I began getting pretty fascinated with those reports. Of course, I was about 9 years old at the time, but I remember it very vividly. And we had major sightings occurring all over the country, including an incident that happened right up here in my neck of the woods. And basically what happened is back in October, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson were apparently abducted down in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and they were given some sort of an exam aboard an unidentified craft, and that was a high-profile case, and it sort of touched off this flap of sightings involving the Coyne helicopter case in Ohio, in which a helicopter nearly collided with an object, and there were radar trackings and things, and there were incidents in the Northeast of sightings of objects in the sky, triangular shapes and so forth. And so these unknown objects became part of the flap in this area. And then a couple months later, in December of 1973, something landed at a restaurant called the La Cabana on Glen Lake in the Glens Falls, Queensbury, New York area. And so that's only about 20-minute drive for me, and that became a pretty interesting CE2 case in which something landed. It affected the soil into two concentric circles of affected soil, and it actually threw the dirt against the door to the restaurant. And the owner back then was Jack Bergeron, and when he arrived for work, he had to get a shovel to get the dirt away from the door to get into his restaurant. And this was during a major set of sightings in the Northeast. And so he's wondering, what landed in my parking lot of his restaurant. And when he got inside, he found that the hot water taps ran cold and the cold water taps ran hot. And this occurred for a couple of weeks following the sighting, and then it eventually dissipated. So whatever happened there gave off these physical effects of affecting the soil. It also threw the soil against the building, and it also affected their water somehow. So these are physical effects that would form what Dr. J. Allen Hynek would call a CE2, or a close encounter of the second kind, in which physical effects were noted and documented. So that became a fascinating part of our local history here. And so I was pretty well hooked on the topic after that. And then fast forward 3 years later, I always had an interest in the Bigfoot phenomena and in cryptozoology. And we had an incident in Whitehall which garnered some, national headlines. And it was involving several police agencies and a possible, a creature outbreak that took place in the Abear Road area in August of 1976. And that involved perhaps as many as a dozen witnesses over about a week-long period. And that incident was front page news, and local affiliates from Albany came up to cover it. So that was a big topic. So here we are with the Bigfoot phenomena, which I had assumed was Pacific, West Coast type of enigma, and yet we had it right in our own backyard here in Whitehall. So now I was pretty well hooked on both the UFO and the Bigfoot topic. And when we examined the Bigfoot incident from 76, the Abear Road incident, we find that it took place during a major UFO flap in the entire Northeast here. In fact, there were a large number of sightings up in this area, a huge flap that extended all the way down into Rockland County. So highly credible sightings taking place right in this area. And yeah, I was pretty well hooked then. And of course, we had other incidents as well, involving UFOs and Bigfoot. And when I went to college, I went to Castleton State College, and that's now Vermont University. And that was where I studied under Dr. Warren Cook, who was a professor of history and anthropology there. And he had an interest in these topics as well. So we worked on cryptozoological phenomena and established a database of Bigfoot sightings in this region.
Now, since you just brought up the Castleton State College, were you around the time then where they were actually, using real bodies to experiment on?
No, that would have been much earlier. But what that is that's when you go on the campus there's a building called the Old Chapel. And the Old Chapel is it's a lecture hall now, but when you go in, you'll see on display old medical devices and things. And that used to be their medical college. So that's where all that stuff took place. And actually, if you go to the library, there's a display case in there which has some of the original articles and things about that time period. And that would have been much earlier, back when they were founding the building. But that was their medical college. And they would, when they needed a cadaver, they would go get one.
That's right. Oh man, I would hate to be in the afterlife going, oh man, they're using my body for this. So, they have a nice lecture hall at the top of the top floor. And I've been there several times when some paranormal researchers like, the haunted collector there, John Zaffis, and Chris Moon, and D. Garcia and stuff, when they were giving lectures there. And they gave talks on parapsychology and ghost hunting and things. Usually around Halloween, they do their lecture tour, and they would stop by there. So I got to meet both of them, and they claimed that is one of the more haunted sites they've been to on their college tour. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't surprise me as well, considering, everything else that has happened. So, yeah, I mean...
Yeah. Got a history.
Oh, yeah, for sure. By chance, Paul, do you remember, I know there was a newspaper article about it, and I know you shared it. I've seen it on the newspaper.com, but do you roughly remember, did they ever say, how many bodies they may have, used to study on?
I'm not sure. But that was how they did it back then. A little different time period. I'm not sure how many that involved, but I do know that when they did those talks there, they would kind of break up into ghost hunting groups, and Chris Moon would use various devices, be it divining rods or the the controversial ghost box, something like that. and John Zaffis would as well discuss it. And they both said they felt that they could feel the history there. So it's definitely one of those places that's seen a lot.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, Paul, so I mean, before we get into like stuff that you have been known to write down, report, maybe even collect stuff from some of the sightings per se. Like one incident I will bring up at one point regarding Bigfoot related from I think it was West Rutland or Chittenden or that area. But anyway, so what about you, Paul? As long as you've been doing this, has there been like, and you can narrow it down obviously, because I bet you have a lot of stories within the 50 years, but I guess if you had to tell me and the audience, like maybe some of your profound stories, that one that really stuck to you throughout these years, of like stories of your own experiences or anything, would you mind sharing a couple if you have any?
Sure. There are incidents that are rather profound, and they are what I call confirmation moments, confirmation sightings. And what they are sightings where sometimes the person involved doesn't even realize how important what they are seeing is. And I'll give you a couple examples. For instance, in Whitehall, we had the A-Bear Road outbreak. But we also had, a few years later, in 1982, in February, we had Dan Gordon, who was a Whitehall patrolman. And I went to school with Dan, and Dan was actually my neighbor, lived in the next street above me. And he's passed on since this all had happened. But Dan was very respectable, very honest, almost brutally honest, I'd say. And he's driving along at 4:30 in the morning, and what they would do is he and another law enforcement official, and they would go out to South Bay, turn around, and come back, and that was part of their patrol. And they're going out there at about 4:30 a.m. One morning in February of 1982, when they had what is probably the most common type of Bigfoot sighting, and that is that of a creature crossing the road in front of your vehicle. It's the most likely spot that you and the creature are going to connect, at night. And so Dan and this other official were stunned. Dan pulls over. He gets out of the vehicle, drawing his weapon, and then tries to pursue. But whatever the creature was, it's long gone over some very rugged, rocky areas, and Dan can't continue the pursuit. Now, what Dan said he saw, and what this other officer saw, was a creature about 7 or a little more, 7 or more feet tall, and it crossed the road in a bipedal manner, 2 legs, taking only 3 steps to get across the road. Now, when the History Channel came up to shoot a documentary, we shot on a smaller road that was adjacent to Route 22 where this had taken place. And that road, even though it was smaller, it took my brother, who was 6'1" in height, took him about 5 to 6 steps to get across that smaller road. And this creature got across in 3 steps. It almost takes it out of the possibility of somebody hoaxing. And who's going to be hoaxing at 4:30 in the morning, at random drivers come across? It just doesn't make any sense. So they had this sighting. They were very adamant about it. We couldn't identify them for over 20 years because it was that sensitive a topic. And they did not want to be known as the Bigfoot cops or things like that. So this was a dark secret for them for years. And Dan finally came forward back around 2002, 2003, and he started to talk about it more openly. And then by about 2006, he had actually appeared on some documentaries where he opened up about what he had seen. In fact, one of the History Channel shows actually brought up, because we're walking up the street one day, and Dan says to me, I want to take a polygraph. And I said, Dan, nobody's questioning, your honesty here. And he says, no, I want to take a polygraph. And so they actually arranged for it. And the state polygrapher came up and gave him a polygraph, and he said, no deception. So that's a difficult sighting if I'm a skeptic to explain, because not only is there a credible witness who's got everything to lose and nothing to gain, but he's also passed a polygraph, and he has a second witness who also confirms what he saw. So those are those types of sightings that are so good that you have to wonder, if you're a skeptic, you have to wonder, gee, how can I explain this? Now, another sighting that was exceptional was that of Cliff Sparks, who used to own the Skeene Valley Country Club, the golf course in Whitehall. And it was a 9-hole course back when this happened in 1975. And it was in May. And Cliff was driving out with his cart to green number 1. And he would get off and turn the hoses on, take some hoses off, and then go to the next hole and stuff and maintain the greens that way. Well, he had his dog, this big dog with him that would jump off and run around and then jump back on the cart with him. Well, as they get up to green 1, there's a creature standing in the middle of the green. And it looks over at Cliff and the dog. And it stares at the dog. And the dog, that is usually rambunctious and jumps off, freezes and just cowers over the side of the cart. Meanwhile, Cliff said that he was absolutely terrified. But what Cliff got to see was something unique that a lot of witnesses don't see. In other words, when the creature is staring at you or running away, you don't see what Cliff got to see. And he got to see the vision of the creature that wasn't focused on him, but was focused on the dog. And he said it had red glowing eyes. And I said, you mean like reflective, like, a raccoon's eyes or a cat's eyes when you hit it with, he said, no, it was a different type of vision. He said it wasn't like that. He said it was like short dots, almost like laser red. And, when we go into the old vernacular of sightings, they would describe this same characteristic with terminology, like, in the older days of, like, its eyes were like glowing embers. And it describes this bizarre red color. So Cliff got to see this unique view of the creature concentrating on the dog, which I think few people have ever seen that. So that's one of those sightings as well. And the creature turns and eventually crashes through the little bit of brush that was there and disappears. And then Cliff never went out at night again after that incident because it affected him so much. He didn't talk about it either for quite a while. And the reason we got the encounter, the sighting, was because we were friends of the family. So there's another one of those landmark confirmation cases that that he had details and things that you wouldn't make up, that we know they're good from who the people were. We knew the people. So that becomes another strong case. Now, this third case, which I think is one of the best, took place in the 2000s, the early 2000s. I think it was 2002, 2003. And it was 2 Hong Kong nationals. And they went fishing up in the Dresden-Clemens area, which is just, a 10-minute drive from Whitehall. And so they're fishing, and they look over, and they see this gorilla-type creature wading through the water at chest level. And I said, wow. I said, daylight sighting creature. I said, well, what did you do? And they said, well, we went fishing. And the beauty of that is that they were talking as if, oh, I didn't realize you had primates in this area. But in their background, in their native background, it wasn't unusual to see a primate. So they didn't even realize how important their sighting was until later on. So there's 3 examples right there of what I would call confirmation sightings.
Perfect, Paul. Yeah, the story there with Dan, right? That was his name. The one who saw across. Yeah. That's one of my favorites for sure. Coming out of the the New York area, especially since it's like right around your neighborhood for sure. So yeah, I haven't actually drove on that road to actually physically see the road myself, but I mean, I hear it's pretty what's the word, like dense or something. Is that a good way to put it? Like it's a dense, nice little quiet little drive from what I understand.
Yeah, it's a major road because it connects Ticonderoga to Whitehall, and but through that section, it's very rugged and rocky when you get off the road. So if you were to pull your car over and go into the go off into the land there, it's rugged, it's rocky, it's woodsy, and it connects into some rural areas. So yeah, it's a rather I can see very quickly how Dan would have lost any type of pursuit of whatever this was. Plus, if it's crossing that road in 3 steps, it's going to be way ahead of you. But I mean, Dan did the right thing. He was stunned, didn't know what it was, went to investigate and so forth. But that was that was a dark secret for 22 years. So I was very thankful that Dan could finally get it off his chest. And later on, before he passed away, he was able to give his story out to various documentaries.
Right now, just remind me, was he was able to do that after he retired or what that word maybe I don't want to say resigned, but maybe retired. Is that the correct way?
Yeah. He had finished out his career as a police officer there, and then was able to talk about it later. But
Right.
it was really, I think it was meeting different people, different witnesses, and then finally some of the documentaries that came into town that he finally decided, I'll come for it, I'll tell it. And yeah, it adds a lot of credibility to the story. Plus, you have the other person citing it as well. He's never actually publicly come forward. And it's like those the 2 Hong Kong nationals. Their casualness with their sighting is amazing, because anybody else would
Hmm.
have probably freaked out. But that gives you a real testament as to the credibility of these types of sightings.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to segue away for a minute. So uh, you know, we'll just we'll switch over the topic though for this bit since we are kind of talking like Bigfoot. So we'll switch over to Bigfoot for a minute. So one of the things I wanted to bring up is, so my dad had one of your books, and he sadly passed away in 2003. And anyway, um, that was the Monsters in the Northwoods book, where I guess it's now out of print or hard to find. I know it's one of those, but or maybe it's even both, Paul. But anyway, I never forgot that in one of the sections of that book that my dad had not only bookmarked, but he had even taken the newspaper article that came out, which is entitled "Is There a Vermont Bigfoot?" which was April 26, 1985, I believe, was when the newspaper article came out in the Rutland Herald. But that's always seemed to be one of my go-tos. I guess so. And you, if I remember correctly, this is where you have like one or two casts, right?
Yeah, we've got a couple of castings. I think that article came out after Dr. Cook had held a conference at Castleton College at the Florence Black Center, and we had an overflow crowd of people that arrived, and there were people in the aisleways and stuff, and I was up on the stage with Dr. Cook, and Cliff Sparks was there, and various witnesses, and they had kind of a roundtable discussion of the Bigfoot phenomena, Dr. Cook giving a slide presentation before everybody gathered there. So that was an exciting event, and I think that's what that article was. And I think it appeared in the Rutland Herald, if I remember correctly. But it was such a popular event that Dr. Cook held a second conference when he went to China, and when he had returned back from going to China to exchange information on the Chinese Che Ren, or their wild man, and the American Sasquatch. So he held the second conference, and that was rather well received as well. So those were kind of landmark type of conferences because they're held by major, universities, and they drew a lot of interest. That was an exciting time, and between the time that those two conferences happened was an incident that happened in West Rutland, Vermont, which involved multiple witnesses. It involved reporting of a creature throwing rocks at a shed, which back then wasn't that common a characteristic, but nowadays is. So that's kind of a red flag that there's something going on there. And in that incident, multiple witnesses heard and saw a creature as it ran up a sort of a gravel road, and it actually left 6 impressions in the road, of which 3 were cast. And they were given to Dr. Cook, and when Professor Cook passed away, they were willed over to me. And so we have those castings. They're about 14 inches in length, about 6 inches wide, and they're pretty consistent. And we have also the pictures of the impressions, and we have the castings. So that's one of those incidents that occurred in 1985 in September. And that's got all those characteristics: eyewitness, vocal, track find, castings. Yeah, so it's one of those really interesting cases.
Yeah, for sure. Also, going back to the newspaper article, it also showed like it's hard to tell with black and white really, but it looked like there's a picture where this person took it, and there's like something like, I don't know, it's a tree that got like torn down or like on a hill or something. I forget exactly what's going on, but basically on one part of this photograph there looks like there's just like I get said, this is like a black and white for the audience too, but it almost looks like on the very top, I think it would be considered the right hand side, because I know they zoomed in on it, but it looks like there's this tall black figure or something that's kind of like
right
staring over the trees or something, or a bush.
Yeah, that's one of those strange photos. And when I took anthropology class at Castleton, Dr. Cook was teaching, and he'd pop that slide up, and we're discussing it in class. So I remember it very vividly. And it was taken near a tavern site. And it was what the focus of the picture is the bridge. And when you look at the bottom of the picture, the bottom center, you will see what is sort of a bridge, or looks like a bridge, but it's not your classic bridge. It's logs that are kind of tied together to form a bridge. And they were taking a picture of that bridge site. And when they got back, they noticed this thing up in the corner, or what looked like a thing. It could be a shadow. It could be, we're not really sure what it is. But that was taken in Chittenden, Vermont. And we went back to the site a time later. Dr. Cook, some other researchers, the Pratts from the Chittenden area, and so forth. And we went back to that bridge site. And what we were looking for is some sort of an upturned stump, or some sort of a weird, alignment of light that would explain that dark figure in the corner, in the top, I should say. And we couldn't. There was nothing there. There was no upturned stump or down tree or any weird factor of light or anything that would explain that. So we're not sure what that is. So either it's some sort of a strange shadow, or it's something that was standing there. But the kicker is that if that was a figure standing, because we reenacted exactly where the photo was taken from and where the spot was, it would be about 7 to 8 feet in height. So it's one of those pictures that you can look at 10 different ways, and it's not anything conclusive, but it's certainly tantalizing and interesting. And it was one of the first photos I know of that was taken in the Vermont area. Now, since that picture was taken, and of course it was in black and white in the newspaper, but the reality is that it's a color picture. And so, we had it analyzed, and they basically said, what you see is what you get. They couldn't do much more with it. And that was back in, 1978, 1979 standards. Now,
Right.
fast forward to 2010, we have another picture that if anybody just Googles Vermont trail cam Bigfoot, they'll get the image immediately pop up on multiple sites. And that's the photo that was taken in Bombazine. So this 2010 one is taken in Bombazine. It's a Vermont trail cam. It was set up by Frank Szynski. And Frank's a friend, and absolutely no question about sincerity or credibility here. Either one of the pictures, they are what they are. And people have tried to explain Frank's picture as being an owl close to the lens. However, Bruce Maccabee, who was a naval optical physicist for years and years, very respected scientist, he recently passed away. He was actually born in Rutland, Vermont. But Bruce had looked at that picture, and he said that it was not close to the lens. And so for the people that say, well, it must be an owl or something close to the lens, Bruce debunked that almost instantly. So we don't know what these pictures are of, but we do know that in Frank's case, the creature, or whatever it was apparently grabbing the apples from his apple tree, because that's why he had set up the trail cam, was to find out what was taking his apples. And we know that the creature was there for 1 minute or less, because if it was there for 1 minute and 1 second, we would have two pictures of it. So it's become one of those really anomalous photos. And there's absolutely no, I go online and I see all this description, wow, somebody's hoaxing, but none of that applicable. There's absolutely no question about the sincerity of Frank Szynski and credibility. So it's one of those cases where we don't know what it is, but that's what it is. The photos are both absolutely authentic. We just don't know what they are photos of.
Correct. Yeah. I remember first hearing about that from the the show Finding Bigfoot, and I definitely remember the whole, it's an hour closer toward the lens, and even I was like, no, because even by looking at the photo on the the TV show itself, because I don't physically have seen it myself, I would love to talk to Frank about that, honestly, because I just find that so fascinating. But anyway, the point to this is, if people really look at the picture too, I should have it pulled up when I say this too, but I don't at the moment. But I know it's on the left-hand side of this creature, whether it's, I don't even know, kneeling or sitting down, but it almost looks like there's little hand, like little fingers, almost like grabbing the bigger creature's arm, almost like it's holding on. So
it does look like that.
Yeah. So that's why I think a lot of people need to realize, if that's an owl, then why does an owl have almost like human-like features like that, which Bigfoot is known to have that sort of appearance, like a human hand type appearance.
And they did recreations. Various people, they put them in that spot and put the camera back to where it was originally and took photos. And what is very impressive, because when I first saw it, I said, well, I don't know what the scale is. And then when we did the recreation, whatever that thing is, if it's not close to the lens, and I'm inclined to believe Bruce Maccabee 100% there, that it's not, then whatever it is very large. It's much larger than an average-sized man. And so it becomes one of these iconic pictures now. I can remember when Frank told me about it, and he says, what do you think I should do? And I said, you know what? I'd just post it and let people have at it. And they have over the years. And the challenge has been, can somebody duplicate that? If that's, an owl close to the lens, can somebody give me a photo that looks just like that? And it's been, 15 years, and no one's been able to duplicate it.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up Frank's story, because if you weren't going to, I would totally go into. I love his story, and like I said, I would love to talk to him about it, like especially after 15 years had gone by. So it would be nice to kind of see some from his perspective, I guess. But yeah,
super nice guy, super credible guy, very honest, and I got to know Frank very well, and he comes up to the festival that we have up here in Whitehall every year. And he's just, he's one of those people that you can trust, you can rely on. And he just puts it out there. He says, this is what it is. And so I think that's the right way to approach it. And, if someone can come up with a photo to duplicate it under controlled circumstances, let's see it. So the challenge is still out there for debunkers to run up and explain it, but it hasn't been explained, even though you'll see some of the most ridiculous things posted sometimes about it, which, don't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. I've seen all that, whatever you want to call it, basically. Yeah. It doesn't really surprise me. Everybody wants to try to debunk it and stuff like that, which, I still remember, like, Finding Bigfoot, when they were recreating it, like, even Bobo, like, he sat down, he didn't even come close at all, and Bobo was a pretty tall guy and pretty wide guy at that time, too, during that show, but still, like, even his mask, I could be wrong with measurements and massive stuff here, Paul, but I would say we would almost need Bobo to be like maybe 3 times more to even get close enough to what Frank had captured.
Well, it was definitely much larger than an average person, and I'll tell you what, it was a real pleasure meeting all the Finding Bigfoot people, Matt and Renee and
Cliff.
James and Cliff Barrickman, and I know Cliff was very impressed with that picture. Yeah,
I know they all loved trying to debunk it in that episode. I think they said they couldn't even. They had to be that. It couldn't have been anything else, or because they didn't know how even an owl could have gotten that close to the lens without it not being more blurry, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or something. So yeah, I give credit where credit is due, which is Frank captured probably the one of the most compelling ones for Vermont as far as what I've seen. So yes.
Yeah, and we know that whatever it was very quick, so it wasn't hanging around for a long time like coyotes or coy dogs might do. It was in and out. So, right. Yeah, I consider that a legitimate photo, and the original one from the 70s, it's a legitimate photo. There's nothing's been hoaxed or tampered there. It's just a matter of what is it. Right.
No, I agree. So Paul, I know it's been a couple years with this book and stuff, so I just want to make a quick shout out with your book. This is actually where I first met you in person, but you released a book, what was it, 2022, I think, The Mysterious Northwood Strange Tales from the Adirondack and Green Mountain.
Right, that was around 2020. We updated it, and that's the one that's out right now. Yep, Mysterious Northwoods, and it's by my brother Robert and myself.
That's right. Yeah, and Robert is elsewhere, right? He's not really local anymore?
Bob is living he's lived all over the place, all overseas. He was in Malaysia for a while. He went to school in Australia and to college there, and he now lives in New Zealand.
Wow.
In fact, I was chatting with him the other day, and I get, that's the publishing business is funny because we were able to put this book together with him in New Zealand and myself in Whitehall, New York. So, the distance doesn't mean what it used to. When I was researching this back in the 70s, I connected with some of the Chinese scientists studying the Che Ren or the wild man. And it would take weeks, maybe even a month or so, for a package to go back and forth, which are, mailed out. And then you would have to take the Chinese articles and translate them. And that was one of those things where, believe it or not, eventually I was going to professors and things, and then eventually I was going to Chinese restaurants to see if they recognized the dialect and things. And so that was always a big chore, and it took so long to do it. Now everything is instant. We're in an instant world, and I talked to my brother the other day over the phone. It sounds like he's in the next room. So yeah, a lot of progress has been made since I was first doing the research into the Che Ren and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I guess I'm just bringing it up because there's a lot like there's a lot going on in here when it comes to reports and stuff. So one that kind of catches my attention just because I kind of turned to the page of it and it had a nice little thing for a Bigfoot sighting from Vermont, but it's from Barrie. It's the 1974 one where it involved two men driving on the country club road and they hear a shriek and spot a tall, dark figure. I didn't know if you could go into that at all. Just like a little bit.
Yeah, it was basically just a vocalization report. When we categorize the reports, there's generally three categories, and that is an eyewitness sighting, a vocalization report, and a track find. And then sometimes you have those extended circumstances where those tracks are preserved in plaster or photographed, and that adds to the evidence. Sometimes you might have a hair sample that's taken and so forth. That was a report that was described to Dr. Cook. And back in the late 70s, Dr. Cook and I and a couple other researchers were establishing a database of sightings from the Vermont and the Northeast, basically, the entire Northeast, because the sightings went for different states as well, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and so forth. And, of course, New York. And so we're able to establish this large database. And that was just a typical sighting that you would get. Driving on a country road, they hear something, they see something at a distance, and we're not sure what they saw. But it was something that was unusual enough that they noted it. And they actually described in that sighting the arms swinging back and forth. And you don't get that generally with bears and things. Yeah, and you also don't get bears standing for extended periods of times crossing roads like with the Dan Gordon sighting and thing. There was a bear, and I believe it was in New Jersey, and they called him Pedals. And they called him that, Pedals or Pedals, because he walked bipedally. And the reason was because the bear had injured its paw. And so it wouldn't go on all fours. It would stand up and walk around like a person. And I think it was eventually killed in one of the New Jersey hunts. But that bear would be seen walking down the street. And, it's one of those things where you go, that's a bear. There was absolutely no question about what it was when you saw a bear walking bipedally. And it looked it wasn't clumsy, but, it was just a casual walk. It wasn't anything fast. So the phenomena that's being seen where these creatures cross the road on three steps, and were like this sighting here that was made in Barrie, they don't fit the pattern of a bear. And it's easy for a skeptic to say, oh, well, that's just a bear standing up. Well, they just don't maneuver well when they're standing up. When they are on all fours, they are dangerous. They can achieve great speeds. And if one is pursuing you, you got to find some sort of cover, because they're just like they're like a tire rolling when they're on all fours. when they're on two legs, it makes them more vulnerable. So it doesn't make sense that this phenomena is a bear crossing the road. It's like apples and oranges.
Right. Huh. What a fascinating little report. I think I just want to do one more regarding Bigfoot from your book there, just to kind of give somebody a little bit more juicy stuff that you have, because this one just caught my attention because it was well, and it almost involved like the mysterious, cattle killings in a way, but this isn't a cattle. This is like so. Let me first say that it took place in September 2019. It was Benson, Vermont, and you called this one the mysterious goat killing.
Right. We've had a few incidents similar to that. One involved the Rutland County region, and there was a series of cattle that were killed, and they weren't sure what had done it. But this was one from September 2019, and of course the Benson. There was a farmer there in Benson, Vermont, and he found 7 of his goats dead, and 13 others were gone. And they were trying to find out, they couldn't find tracks leading up to where they were, and there appeared to be bite marks on the necks. And, we weren't sure, but they didn't really devour them. So it's a question of what predator did that. And, of course, a lot of people would say, well, maybe it was a catamount. And, catamounts are certainly, even though in New York State they'll say there's no catamounts, there's no nesting catamounts. I have sightings from every month of the year of catamounts. And, the cougars or panthers, whatever you want to call them. And perhaps this was one of those, but we're not sure what it was. And the incident was actually reported by the Channel 3 news. So I think it was WCAX. So we're
Right.
not sure what killed those animals. We do know that it happened, and it certainly appeared to be cat-like, much like the Pope case in Rutland County back in, I believe it was the late 80s, in which they thought a catamount may have snuck through a window in this barn, and it had battered around about a dozen or so cattle, and some had to be put down because they were hurt so badly, but it didn't necessarily eat them. And of course, that is sort of a cat-like behavior. So these cases may have been actually cases of catamounts, but they were not proven.
I'll have to dig through the WCAX archive thing, see if I can find this again, because I used to stop watching TV for a while. So, and at that time during 2019, I did not have cable, and I'm surprised I didn't even hear about this from somebody else, because they know I'm into this stuff as well. But so I guess to wrap up the Bigfoot real quick, Paul, is have you heard or had any like recent sightings at all, whether it be like from Whitehall area or Vermont area?
Yeah, it's continual. You'll get reports. If you get a dry spell, it usually gets filled in the next couple of years. Let's say you don't get a report from 2018 to 2019, and then in 2020 you might get 6 reports from that time period. People, because a lot of times they don't report it right away, and sometimes they don't know what to report and where to report it, and sometimes they just don't want to. Something triggers it where they will eventually report it, but they didn't want it at the time because they didn't want people to
ridicule
what they think of.
Yeah.
So the sightings are continual. I think the last one we did in the book was actually a daytime sighting of a creature that was sort of laying down not far from the golf course back in January of 2020, and that was the last report we put in the book. But since then, there have been other sightings that have been noted I'd have to grab the circular file, but yeah, it's a continual string of sightings that forms a pattern that goes back to the Algonquin and the Iroquois and their stories of stone giants and giant men of the mountains and Wendigos and things like that. Samuel Champlain's go-go. So these creatures, it's a well-defined pattern of sightings. So if I'm the skeptic, then I'm asking myself, why are we seeing these creatures? So that's a valid form of study too, from an anthropological, sociological point of view. If I'm a researcher, I'm documenting it, I'm investigating it, and so forth. So I think for the skeptic and the believer and the person on the fence, whatever it is, I think this is a win-win-win situation, because these are important things to study, regardless of what the reality is. And over the years, I found that there seems to be a connectivity between the various phenomena, be it the UFO phenomena, the cryptozoological phenomena, some of the parapsychological and poltergeist type phenomena, and so forth. There seems to be a connectivity, some common denominators between these different phenomena. And when we had a report like the Abear Road incident in 1976 in August, it doesn't surprise me now that that was during a major UFO flap. And while that incident happened over a week-long period in August of 76, it ended in gunfire on September 1st on an adjacent road to Abear Road, in which two hunters shot at a creature that came at them, and they actually reported it to the New York State Troopers, who went out to investigate. So from that incident, it doesn't surprise me that that was during a major UFO flap, and that we had a UFO landing reported in the town, in the village of Whitehall. I talked to the police dispatcher. Now, back in 1976, police dispatcher was a great job, because you'd be down at the police station, you would handle a couple of calls, watch some television, whatever, and that would pretty much be the night. Bob Martell was the dispatcher on duty that evening, and he said a woman called, and he and the sergeant both knew who the woman was, and they said it was only a street or so over, a street and a half over. So they just jumped in the car and went over. And she said that something landed in her yard. And then when they got there, she said it just took off and it was right over there. And when they pointed to the spot, Bob Martell said he went over and there was a flattened down circular area of matted down grass. And he said it was about 20 feet in diameter. And he said he reached down and he could feel the heat coming off of where something had landed there. So this is another one of those strange things. So that all happened within a week of the Abear Road creature outbreak. So we have these different phenomena occurring, and there seems to be a connectivity between them. And now, the stuff that George Knapp has reported on for the Skinwalker Ranch out in Utah and those investigations, we see this pattern of heavy Native American background. We have all these different phenomena occurring in an area together, as if these are different manifestations from the same source phenomena. So that is probably over the years what has surprised me most. I didn't think I'd be here when I began this research back when I was a child. And so I go where the evidence takes me, where the reports go. I take down the report as close as possible, every detail you could imagine, because something like Cliff's red glowing eyes, those characteristics, some people would like to leave those out, not mention those. I'll be the first one to mention them because that's a key factor. And I think we have to keep doing that. We have to keep getting this information down as accurately as possible, and maybe it'll mean something later on.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I for one am always saying like seeing is believing in this case and stuff like that. But I mean, that's just the way, I don't know. I guess that's the way I'm always brought up. But I don't like, cause I hear somebody say they saw this like just this reddish amber color staring back at me that looked like it was 7-8 feet tall. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss it, but for somebody like me, unfortunately, I just like to have my own like sighting when it comes to the on like. Oh God, I hate saying this, but it's just like I'm always on the fence of like the whole cryptid stuff. But I mean, I don't dismiss it because I mean there's animals that we discovered that back in the day we said they don't exist, and then all of a sudden we discovered them. So I mean, why can't there not be like anything like Bigfoot or Dogman or anything like that to really be out there? But one thing I want to say, Paul, and we can actually use this question probably to switch over to UFOs. So, what is your thought or opinion on the whole? When they say Bigfoot and UFOs, they say like, UFOs um, drop the Bigfoot down, and then therefore they pick them back up. That's why they're gone and so quick, or something like that. You know that theory at all?
Right. What we have to do is separate the phenomena from the dogma and the baggage that is connected with it. For instance, let's say with UFOs, we all the time connect UFOs and aliens. We don't need to do that. We just connect what it is. UAP is actually a much more accurate term than UFO. And we have to approach it that way, I feel. And so I don't usually say alien or anything like that because it's got baggage connected to it as to other things. I report what is what I accurately report as to best of my ability what's been reported. And so the same thing with Bigfoot. I don't know what Bigfoot is. I don't know if it's an unknown biologic. I don't know if it's some sort of apparition type being. I don't know what it is, but I do know that the sightings are real, and the people that report them are sincere, and this is a common human experience. And I find it very suspicious, very interesting, I should say, that we have these UFO flaps and Bigfoot outbreaks at the same time. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's obvious. And what will happen is you'll investigate a sighting, and it's some sort of a creature outbreak. And then as you start peeling the layers away of that onion, you start to see, oh, wow, they had some sort of religious experience years before. They had a poltergeist outbreak. They also had, a UFO experience take place a week after the incident, and so forth. So it almost appears as if these are different manifestations from the same source phenomena. And I think that research in places like Skinwalker Ranch and so forth, I think that's where this research, these investigations are heading. I think that's the modern take on these phenomena. And I think when we have a UFO sighting, we have to not use alien. We have to use what it is. And, unidentified aerial phenomena is actually very accurate. And so I think it's encouraging that the government has been investigating this, the Pentagon and so forth, and that they've had an intense interest in this over the years. And now we're actually seeing some of the footage of UAPs and so forth that have been taken. So I don't think we need to say that it's aliens dropping off creatures or anything like that. We just say that these phenomena seem to overlap, and there seems to be a connectivity between them. I think that's about as far as we can go. And, let's be clear that the UFO phenomena, the UAP phenomena, is nothing new. This goes back as far as our history goes. We can find references. Jacques Vallée has written extensively on UFO phenomena being reported, centuries ago and so forth. A huge history of it. So it's not like something just came here and left and that type of thing. This is part of us. This UFO phenomena is part of our existence. And it may have applications which are not linear. We got to get away from the linear thinking of they are from out there. Whatever this phenomena is, it's here with us. So it coexists with us at some level, or some plane. I got to meet Dr. J. Allen Hynek back in the 1970s, and a great thrill to see him talk and chat with him. And he was then talking about not aliens and things like that. This was the foremost expert on UFOs in the world at the time, the Air Force consultant to Project Blue Book right from the very beginning to the end. And so this was an astronomer at Northwestern University, the equivalent of Carl Sagan at the time. And he was a profound scientist. And that's how he talked. That's how we know Close Encounters of the First Kind, Second Kind, Third Kind. That's his terminology from his original book there, The UFO Experience. So he was talking not of aliens and, outer space and things. He was talking of parallel reality. That's what he called it. And he said that all the great religions of the world talked about another plane of existence, and we talk about other dimensions. And that was where, after all of his years of research, that's where he was heading. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, you just bringing up Hynek. Yeah, I just found his book at a book sale like a few weeks ago. But anyway, I'm so glad that you brought him up because he was a smart man. He could have had Project Blue Book probably shut down way sooner than how long it actually lasted. If he were to have said, "Oh yeah, this is alien," blah blah blah, they probably would have shut it down. But the way he approached it by not physically saying that, I think it also gave him the funding of being able to investigate more into it than just saying, "Yeah, this is what it is, case closed." So, and plus, Hynek, Hynek, real quick, was skeptical himself, and I think he remained skeptical even to his dying day.
Hynek was a true scientist, and what the Air Force needed was a hitman to explain sightings. So they would have a sighting, and then they would, have Dr. Hynek look at it, and they would say, "How can you explain this?" And he'd say, "Well, temperature inversion." Well, and of course, the famous one it was sort of blown out of proportion in Michigan was the swamp gas, and that became a key word years later. But he was the guy that would debunk and explain, and so that there would be no real cases that they couldn't explain, that he would try to explain them all. And what happened is in the mid-'60s, there was a sighting, 1964, Socorro, New Mexico. Lonnie Zamora was a police officer, and he saw this downed craft. He was in pursuit, actually, at the time of a speeder, but he knew who the person was. It was a small community, and he broke off the pursuit because he saw a flash out by where there was a dynamite shack. And when he got out to that area, he saw this downed craft, egg-shaped, on some sort of lander, what looked like landing pods or whatever, and he saw two beings outside of the craft that looked like they were children-sized. And as he approached, he didn't know what he was getting into, and then the object eventually left. It flew away. And then years later, Ray Stanford wrote a book called Socorro Saucer in a Pentagon Pantry, and he documented other sightings of the object that day. Lonnie Zamora, when he went to the site, he found landing traces where the craft had set down, and we have multiple witnesses now. And Lonnie Zamora, there was no question about his sincerity. But at the same time, this kind of ruined him as a police officer, because now he was, like Dan Gordon didn't want to be known as the Bigfoot cop. Now this was the UFO cop. And so, but that was a highly credible incident. And Dr. Hynek, it clearly affected Dr. Hynek to the point that he said, I couldn't explain this one. I couldn't explain how this was a sincere person, sincere witness. It's a legitimate case, and it's unexplainable at this time. And so Dr. Hynek makes this transition from being the chief debunker for the Air Force's Project Blue Book, Special Report 14, whatever, right up to 69. He makes this transition from being the chief debunker to the leading proponent for UFO research when they founded the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois. which is now the J. Allen Hynek Center. So that was the journey he made. And he was aware, I think, of these different aspects of the phenomena that are often underreported, different strange characteristics of the phenomena. And I think he saw that there was more going on here. And if we go back to the work of people like John Keel, Brad Steiger, they were talking about these different manifestations from the same source phenomena. And so there is, in my opinion, it's been pretty well established after 50 years of research on my end that there's a connectivity between these phenomena.
That's fair. That's fair enough. All right, so Paul, so Vermont is known for some instant spots, I will say, for when it comes to as you and I think everybody else can say, like UFO windows. I know we chatted this morning about it, but what you said I think would help fit to at least give you credibility that this is in fact another one of those terms or another one of those locations for the term the UFO window, which is Cobble Hill, which is in Milton, Vermont. Now I know personally you don't know too much on it yourself, but you know, I'll just let you take what you told me this morning anyway. You know somebody who knows about the window. I guess yeah. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Well, no. We have different areas around. For instance, you could talk about that area for the Vermont region being a hotbed or a hot spot for UFO activity. And in the New York State, you go down to places like Pine Bush, Westchester County, and actually we were talking about Dr. Hynek. The last book he wrote was called Night Siege, and that was about the UFO flap down in Westchester County, New York, and that was over 5,000 sightings of boomerang-shaped craft down in that region. So you have these hotbed areas like places in Vermont, places in all over the world, where you have these flap areas, and they seem to be highly active UFO windows. And that's a term that John Keel had written about back in the 60s and 70s. He would call them UFO windows. And they may be some sort of region where this phenomena seems to occur more than in other places. So yeah, we may have UFO regions, UFO hotspots, and they may be called window areas. They may be called vortexes. Where there's a plethora of different terms for them. But it's where this activity has become more commonplace. And what's interesting is you look into the histories of these areas, and there's usually a history about the phenomena. So again, it's not as if something is visiting us. It's as if something is being recognized that's already here, and it's part of our human condition.
Right. And so I guess what I want to switch to real quick is, so there's been talk over the years, I'm assuming you've heard it too, but Lake Champlain, they say there's like an underwater base. Do you have anything that you can say on that?
Lake Champlain's had several sightings of UFO type activity. I think if you were to take almost any region, you would find a particular spot or location that has a lot of activity in it. And there can be several factors. One, maybe it's publicity. Maybe a certain incident gets publicized and then more people recognize it. Maybe there's other areas that are underreported and so forth. But Lake Champlain certainly has its share of UFO incidents. It's a huge lake. It's between two different countries and multiple states, and it's a wide region to look at. So that's one of the areas too. This whole Northeast is fascinating to me because we have everything we could want up in the Northeast. We have major waterways with the Great Lakes and with the Atlantic Ocean. We have major cities. I mean, New York City and so forth. We have major regions of rural areas that are almost primitive in nature. For instance, if you remember when the two prisoners escaped from Dannemora a few years ago, all the searches that they didn't turn them up. The modern technology and stuff, the helicopters, the infrared, all that, they made mistakes where they shot at people in one case, and another one, the gentleman ran across a field, which opened him up to being apprehended. So it wasn't technology that caught them; it was their own mistakes, and that was because these regions were so rural, so dense, so rough that the modern technology didn't find them. So we can look at these regions and we see that this whole Northeast has a tremendous, everything you would want. It's kind of a microcosm of the world right here in the Northeast. So I think it's a great area to research, and we have all sorts of stories of UFOs being seen on Lake Champlain. There's also stories of UFOs being seen on the Great Lakes. And in fact, back in the 70s and 80s there, Jay Gourlay, who was a reporter, wrote a book called The Great Lakes Triangle, talking about, and that had incidents, major UFO incidents, and there was talk there of underground bases and things like that. I just have to note the phenomena and keep documenting, and as far as I'm concerned, is just document, and let the patterns form themselves.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair enough. All right, Paul. Well, we have some cases here that you have wanted to share with us regarding the Vermont area. One is Burlington of March 1980.
Yeah, that took place. Of course, we're being into March. We're almost on the anniversary of it. March 22nd, 1980, Burlington, Vermont, and this was one of the most interesting radar visual cases I've ever come across. And what had happened is there were scores of sightings of objects, and they were reported by the Burlington police. I think it was Colchester, if I remember correctly. So they were reported all over by reputable witnesses. I happened to communicate with an astronomer, an amateur astronomer, who watched one of these objects through his telescope. And while all these sightings were going on and newspaper reports, there was a timeline developed. And basically at about 10 p.m., the airport started receiving these reports. And they're in the northwest portion of the sky. And so at 10:20, the Colchester, Vermont police, they reported these sightings to the airport as well. So Burlington International Airport is trying to monitor what's going on. And the air traffic controller actually left the radar room momentarily to take a look into the sky to see if they could see anything. So at about 10:45, we're getting up to almost 11 o'clock, two air traffic controllers observed an object which jumped and rolled faster than anything they'd ever seen. They described it as being bright yellow, red, and blue in color. 10:50 p.m., the airport picked up a UFO on radar. It was at the north and right, heading at a 340 degrees, and it appeared to be about 3,000 to 4,000 feet up, and it was going away from them. So at 10:51 p.m., the two air traffic controllers lose the visual sightings. Also, 10:51, the object is still being tracked on radar on about a 10-mile sweep of the radar screen. The object moves, and it heads up to about a 370-degree angle northwest, and then stopped on a dime. Now, at that same time, a second UFO now appeared, and this was off of Schuler Island, New York. And that object, according to the radar screen and their estimations and their formulas, they measured it to be about 1,500 feet long. It's huge. Now, the object was at a 295-degree angle. So the object starts moving towards the other object at 1,500 miles per hour. This was according to the calculations of the speed and time that it took them to get from one object to the other. And then as it approached the second object, it stopped on a dime. And then the two objects appeared off to the side. They darted towards the larger objects. Now, all four of these objects appeared to merge together as one, and then they vanished off of the radar screen. Now, I contacted Plattsburgh Air Force Base, which usually monitors quite a bit. You know, that was a major base in the Northeast. They said they hadn't reported anything. The Aerial Phenomena Organization, the Center for UFO Studies, all investigated the case. They couldn't find any explanation for it. So that becomes one of these strange cases. Now, and very reputable, incredible. Now, the astronomer that I talked with, the amateur astronomer, was watching one of these objects through his telescope. He said that the object, when it was hovering, was triangular in shape. And when it was moving, it formed a cylindrical or cigar-shaped. So these are, this is a major radar, what Dr. Hynek would categorize as a radar visual, in which you have not only credible sightings, and we're talking about policemen, we're talking about regular citizens, across the boards. We're talking about an amateur astronomer, air traffic controllers, and so forth. This became a major radar visual case, and it's right here in the Burlington area in 1980.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I should look up this one too, see if I can find anything else too on this myself, because that's really fascinating.
It made the front page of the Burlington Free Press. So
perfect.
I can tell you exactly what the date is. It's the March 24th, 1980 edition of the Burlington Free Press.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, I'll have to. What was the article called, Paul? Do you have that?
Yeah, it was called Strange Lights Dance in Sky, Police Report. And the article was written by Fran Brock, who was a staff writer.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll look that up when I get a chance, Paul. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so like what you were saying, this is probably the first time Vermont really had something like this on their radar, as far as you're aware anyway, right?
Well, I would say that radar visual cases have been around since we've had radar, because the UFO phenomena is incredibly consistent. So I would say this is a classic case where all this can be verified and was investigated and so forth. But, you probably have similar cases that weren't reported as thoroughly as this one. That's
true. Yeah, because a lot of times you don't really get people that want to share that, or they don't want to, because once they know, once they hear that this place has it, then, the mysterious men, I guess, will come and take it away, I guess will be the appropriate term. I don't know if I want to dare say like Men in Black, but we'll just say people from the government will come and just take their whole computers or radar just for I don't know, Paul. Would it be considered like evidence or something, or just to get rid of the evidence?
Well, no. In a case like this, it's already reported in multiple police agencies, so it's a matter of public record. So it's out there. There's no control over it because it's an international airport. You've got multiple air controllers and so forth, multiple police departments involved. So the case will be out there.
Right.
It's a matter of what's going on here. And, this isn't the only case in the Northeast that's like this. We can go back to 1974, and there was a case in Albany, New York, and it was up in the Northeast here as well, upstate New York. And there was a massive UFO flap. It was August the 20th, 1974. And people were sighting UFOs all over the state, including pilots who were sighting craft, an unknown object traveling at tremendous speeds. It was an interesting case. It was documented by Ernest John in the book Celestial Passengers with Margaret Sachs. And that incident, Ernest John was a reporter or investigator for the National Investigation for Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, at the time. And so he documented this case. And we had all sorts of sightings from police, New York State troopers, and so forth of these objects. In fact, there were so many sightings that the WWSC radio station in Glens Falls, New York, it's about a half an hour from me, and my brother used to work there. That station started broadcasting live reports as people were seeing UFOs flying over West Mountain, these strange objects dancing in the sky. And so crowds started to gather at the radio station. So many people gathered and were watching these objects that the police actually escorted them down to East Field so that they could get them out of the road. And so that became a mass sighting. Now, what happened at Albany Airport is that they had a special radar that they ended up using, and they were able to track this object as it came in, and it was coming in at tremendous speeds, and it was unknown and sighted by other pilots. And this became one of the best radar visual cases for the year of 1974. So these incidents have been noted for years. And it's one of the more interesting of the scientific examination, because you got so many credible witnesses attesting to what's being reported.
Right. Yeah. That's very well said. And I mean, recently, with everything that's going on, I really do hope that we do continue the pressure so we can get more out on what's going on with the whole unidentified aerial phenomenon too, so we can get more witnesses out so more people can understand like they're not alone. And I'm saying that as in like, being abducted, because I mean, there's a lot of cases about people getting abducted. There's people seeing these things either coming out of the water or in the sky, and we can actually turn this into the next story real quick, which is I don't see a date or a year on this one, so I'm assuming this is like 1973, I think, from what I saw on the other one, from the little screenshot that you had sent me. But it's from Cannon, Vermont, where this mother and daughter spent 20 terrified minutes in their car, all because of this very bright, what did they say? Like a bright white that it sounds like, for me, kind of proofreading this, they saw the light as they were coming back from Colebrook, New Hampshire, to return to their town in Cannon, Vermont, obviously. But so, and I did some GPS stuff before this too. So from Cannon to Colebrook, New Hampshire, it took about 11 minutes. So that's kind of terrifying that this took 20 minutes though. Like, but there was obviously more going on in this case, which I'm not really sure what else more that can be said, except for that there was, like a round, bright orange glow. I think I saw at one point, like, they had to stop the car because it was so bright that they couldn't really see the road. And then wasn't it like they saw something else besides just the saucer?
Well, this is actually another case from March of 1977. And this would have been, it was reported in the March 12th was the storyline. So it might have been, March 10th, March 9th, something like that. But I can read you the entry we had in the Mysterious North Woods. And it says, Cannon, Vermont, March 1977. While driving in the evening on U.S. Route 3, this woman and her mother spotted a fast-moving saucer-shaped object that appeared to follow them over a stretch of about 8 miles. They veered off after 20 minutes. The object was close at one point. They were, and this is a direct quote, terrified it was going to land on top of their car. She said, and another quote here, as it grew closer, it grew brighter until it was above us. It was round, a saucer shape, and a bright orange glow from the lights underneath it lit up the whole road. The object did not make a sound and appeared to have 4 extended supports that were flat on the bottom, suggesting the possibility of some sort of gear. And of course, this is the quote that you always see connected with these stories. People may think I'm crazy, but I know what I saw, said one of the women. That was reported in the mainstream news as well as tabloids. And it's typical of many of these motorist incidents. For instance, in 1978 in Indian Lake, New York, there was an incident in which this type of pursuit happened. And these gentlemen claimed that this object was pursuing them and had pursued him for a long period of time. And he actually suffered sickness, which was consistent with radiation sickness. And he had no memory of what had happened. He had lost time. And then under regressive hypnosis, they told this story of abduction. And that was in 78 in Indian Lake. Now, in this particular case, there didn't appear to be missing time. So that's usually a red flag that something else is going on. Either the witness is repressing a memory or something happened to them, and then it is intentionally repressed from them. The classic case like this, and I'm not saying this is an abduction case because it doesn't appear to be this Cannon case, but the Indian Lake one appeared to be. And the classic abduction case for the Northeast would be Betty and Barney Hill. And I met Betty, and I corresponded with her briefly, and I got to see her talk, the last talks that she did, and she actually talked in Rutland, Vermont, one time in the 70s. That I saw her as well. So I was very familiar with the case. And once you meet Betty, it's very apparent that she's very sincere about her experience. And what happened to her is back in 1961, they're traveling, Betty and Barney Hill are traveling back through the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And they experienced missing time, which was the term that Bud Hopkins made famous with his book, Missing Time. And that was, they would suffer these dreams of nightmares, and they couldn't account for a couple of hours. I believe it was about 2 hours. I can't remember the exact time frame, but they couldn't account for it on their trip home. And so eventually they sought the help of Dr. Benjamin Simon, who was one of the top, psychiatrists at the time. And he put them under regressive hypnosis, and they told corresponding stories of being taken aboard a craft and meeting these various beings, given some sort of physical examination, and then being released. And there's an intricate story there involving she was given some sort of a book or what looked like a book, and then they took it back, and she she was in communication with the leader quite a bit, the person she described as the leader. These were beings about 4.5 feet tall or so. And eventually, she also was shown, she asked, "Where are you from?" And they showed her what was a 3-dimensional star map. And she said, "Do you know where you are?" And she said, "I don't even know where the Big Dipper is," or something like that. And he says, "Well, it's pointless." So she was able to draw that map under hypnosis. And that map became a big focus of investigation. And Marjorie Fish had built various models of star systems. And she was able to line up the star system, and she believes it was Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli, which involves 2 suns very close together in multiple planets. And so that was the story. And of course, her niece had written a book as well with Stanton Friedman, Kathleen Martin, about the encounter called, oh dear. The name of the book by John G. Fuller was The Interrupted Journey, but the book that Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Martin wrote was called Captured. And so the Northeast has one of these, probably the most famous UFO abduction case, and that was from the 60s, and it has some really credible aspects to it. And after meeting Betty, I was pretty sincere. I felt she was very sincere, and I feel that that's a legitimate case. Whatever happened to her, she's telling it the way she felt it had happened. And unfortunately, Barney had passed away in the late 60s. And but Betty, last time I met her was out at Rochester at the Mutual UFO Network symposium, and she was giving a presentation there, and that was in the early 2000s. So she has since passed away as well. But yeah, I feel that's a real case, and it's one of the landmark abduction cases, and it gives us some more insight into what this phenomena is all about.
For sure, especially with oh man, I'm probably gonna butcher his name. Travis Scott, I believe, who's known for the movie reference would be A Fire in the Sky. I think that would be who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that was a Travis Walton.
Walton.
And, Travis that was another case. When I saw Dr. Hynek lecture, that was one of the cases he talked about. And he said, really, when Dr. Hynek was analyzing the case, he said that's really 2 sightings in one, or 2 incidents reported in one. First, there is the multiple witnesses, the logging crew, who saw the object. And then the second aspect of the case is Travis's own experience aboard apparently aboard a craft before he returned. And the general synopsis of the story, the movie was fictionalized, and it got a lot of the details wrong, and it wasn't as accurate as it should have been. But the case was written in the Walton experience, originally back in the 70s by Travis. And that case involved several of the logging crew coming back. They're near Snowflake, Arizona, and they're driving through the woods, and they see what is this glow, and they think it's some sort of a forest fire or something. And of course, part of their job is to get rid of, the dry wood and so forth to prevent such a thing. So they're not sure what they're coming up upon, but he said it didn't quite look right. And then they see this diamond-shaped craft hovering. And they stop the truck, and Travis, for whatever reason, jumps out and runs towards the object. And as he gets closer, and he said himself, he said, I was kind of showing off, I suppose. And they're yelling at him to come back. And then a blue beam of light shoots from the bottom of this diamond-shaped hovering craft, and it hits Travis and throws him violently backwards. And they thought immediately, the rest of the crew thought that Travis was killed. And so they decided to leave to go get help. And when they returned, there's no Travis. And so there was a 5-day period there where the sheriffs were suspecting some sort of foul play, and maybe the crew had killed Travis, and so all sorts of allegations and such were going on. And so eventually they took polygraphs, and everybody passed, and one was inconclusive. So it started to garner some credibility. And then Travis turned up 5 days later, and they brought him to hospital. And, he had been, I believe he was dehydrated, and I'm not sure what the other characteristics were, but nothing specific enough to identify what had happened to him. But he told this story of waking up on board what he thought was a hospital. And then he saw these beings about 4.5 feet tall or so with large wraparound type eyes, is how he described it. And I remember under hypnosis, he said the eyes, only horses have eyes like that. And he was describing the eyes, and it really bothered him. And he actually pushed one of these beings, and he said it was like marshmallow feeling to him, and he easily pushed him back. And then the story in the movie gets all wild, where he's in a cocoon and all this stuff. None of that really happened. What actually happened is he was panicking, and he wasn't sure what was going on. And then eventually he met a helmeted figure who looked like a normal man, and he sort of led him through this huge craft. And he told this story where he wasn't communicating with him through words, but he knew what he meant and so forth. And so the theory here is that he was taken aboard and given some sort of exam or being treated somehow, and that this being, which was normal looking but in a helmet, was sort of calming him down a bit. And eventually Travis remembers waking up on the side of the road, like in a ditch, and having the object leaving. And he was left behind, and he called his family, and they came and got him. And then the Travis Walton experience was born, and that became one of the most interesting UFO cases and most controversial, and one of the most highly debated cases ever in the annals of ufology. Dr. Hynek and Coral Lorenzen of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization and so forth, they both thought there was great merit in that case. And that I remember Dr. Hynek said, with all that witness testimony, with everybody on the logging group and so forth, he says the story hangs together. And so that became one of the more famous abduction cases as well.
Yeah, I kind of wish the movie stayed true to what actually happened, but I mean, it's a movie. They're gonna add stuff, fix stuff to make it scary. So
that is exactly what Travis said. Travis said you wouldn't believe what they wanted to do, and he, what is I'll never understand is that you don't need to do that because the real story is 10 times more interesting than the one they put on film.
Yes. I will agree with that for sure. Something about his case has always inspired me. Maybe it's because of the blue white aspect as him getting shot back. I think it might be that, or it could just be very well the fact that he was gone for 5 days. I mean, I know there's stories where I think it was a hiker. There was like a story a couple of years ago, I want to say, maybe 10 years, where this hiker was hiking up some mountain. I want to say it was around like New Hampshire. And anyway, he ended up somehow waking up in California. I don't know if you heard about that.
That's I had written about that case as well. That's I couldn't tell you the name. He was I believe a fire captain up in Canada, and he was skiing on Whiteface Mountain. And I happen to have a sister who lives up in the Lake Placid area, so I was getting the reports as they were happening. And he went missing, and they couldn't find him. They started, there was helicopter search and skiers searching and so forth. And so they went on for days.
Mm-hmm.
And then he turned up in, I believe it was near San Diego, California, 5 days later with no knowledge of how he had gotten there. And since, if you remember the runaway bride case where she claimed she was abducted by a man and then released in another state, that got prosecuted because she reported it and it was a hoax, and she had reported it that way. That's why she was prosecuted and had to pay for the search and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, there was no crime. So, anybody can just go and not tell you where they're going. There's no crime being committed. So there's no repercussion for the search or anything like that. And he just had no knowledge of it. And I don't think it's ever been adequately explained. But it was one of those really fascinating cases of, gee, how did he get to California in 5 days? And how did he get there? And did he hitch a ride? Did somehow he got there? But there's never been an official investigation of it in that sense because there's no crime being committed.
Right. Just like that what you were saying.
Recent.
Oh yeah. Was it recent?
Yeah, that was I want to say 2020-ish. 22-ish,
okay.
Something like that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I might be thinking of another one then. I don't know. I know there's sometimes multiple things like that where that pop up where, you hear this person's here 1 minute and then they wound up somewhere else where they originally didn't even start. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a writer in Vermont named Joe Citro, and Joe has written extensively about the Bennington Triangle. That's a phrase he came up with, and obviously it's like terminology would be like the Bermuda Triangle. He called it the Bennington Triangle, and that's where you have people that are on like paths, and they're walking along, and somebody steps off the path to go to the bathroom or do something, and they never see them again.
Yep.
And it's so absurd because, if an animal gets you, there's going to be some sort of commotion. There's going to be some sort of sign. And, and there's another researcher named Dave Politis who's written a series of books called Missing 411 books. And he documents these types of cases all over the country. And he noted a couple from from the Lake Placid area as well. So, these are really fascinating and disturbing. And, I don't know how to explain it. And it brings up, thoughts of vortexes and other realities and things like that. And we just don't know. All we can do is keep documenting, and maybe the answers will eventually emerge.
That's right. Yeah, wormholes is another good one, too. So, yeah, there's a lot that we could say for sure. But all right, Paul, again, thank you so much for your time. I know we had a little hiccup at the beginning here, but people wouldn't really know. But Paul somehow got disconnected, I guess, and so we had to reconnect and go from there. But other than that, it's been quite I would say informal. Oh man, is that the word I'm trying to think of? Yeah, I'll just say informal, like for me anyway, because some of these cases have still inspired and fascinated me, and some are pretty much new to me. So, but if anybody gonna know anything about cryptozoology when it comes to Bigfoot stuff and UFO, how's it pronounced, Paul? UFOlogy? I forget how you pronounce it.
They usually just say ufology, but
Ufology. Thank you.
yeah, one of the things back in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
this was often considered to be a taboo type subject, and one of the things that I've seen happen in my lifetime is that this has gone full circle. And now a town that was divided when there was a sighting back in the 70s and of Bigfoot, and when there was a sighting by police in the 1980s that couldn't even be reported with their names connected to it for years, for decades later. Now that has been replaced by an enthusiasm, and it's come full circle as a positive. So what was a negative in the 70s is now a positive. In fact, in my hometown of Whitehall, every year they now have the Bigfoot Calling Festival. And that is where we now have had groups gather of as many as 5,000 people in Whitehall. And they gather for this festival, and it's all very positive, and it's in celebration of the Bigfoot phenomena for this area, the Sasquatch phenomena. And it's called the Sasquatch Calling Festival. And what they do is they hold an all-day festival from 11 to 6, and they have speakers talking about the topic. I've been fortunate enough to talk at every event so far, and we have people like Mike on, people like Steve Coles, Emily Fleur, and Brian Goslin, and all sorts of speakers. And there's all sorts of booths and people from all over that you can get a feel for the Bigfoot phenomena where we're at now. And then at 5 o'clock, they all gather in the amphitheater, and they have people do their best Bigfoot call. So it became this nice festival. But it shows you how we've gone full circle from this being a negative to now being a positive. And I think that's, this should be a phenomena that if somebody experiences, they shouldn't have to wait 22 years to tell their story.
I agree. Now is the time. All right, Paul. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm really hoping I can go out to the Sasquatch Calling Festival this year. I've been wanting to go for the past few years, but like always, it never fails. Something comes up and I forget it that day, or something else is going on, and I just can't make it out there. So I'm really hoping I can make it out this year.
It's the last Saturday in September. That's when they've been holding it every year now, and it's right at the pavilion. So it's a nice, positive win-win for the community, and it's a way to embrace this phenomena and to have everything be nice and positive. And everybody's always been on good-natured terms, and it's always been a fun event. So I hope it just continues, and we just keep growing and growing. And people like Barbara Spohr and Cheryl Patorti and Dana Grant stuff have done this for years now, and it's just a really fun event. Hope to see you there.
Yeah, for sure, Paul. It'd be nice to chat with you again. It's been a while, but you know what? Speaking of being positive, I think it was last year, Paul. I want to say it was actually September of 2024, if I may say, where they finally added what do they call it? A WGP Foundation Legend and Lore. Oh man, I don't have the image in front of me, but I think they called it the Big Whitehall Bigfoot plaque.
That's right. If you go down to the pavilion area, that's where we hold the festival now. There is a statue there that was done by Hakeem Dominguez, or Dominguez Hakeem, and he donated it to the town, and that's a Bigfoot statue. And right next to it is now an official New York State Legends and Lore marker, which is recognizing the Bigfoot phenomena for the Whitehall area. So, we officially recognize it's the same type of marker that if you were to go down to Sleepy Hollow, you see the legend of Sleepy Hollow down in lower New York and so forth. These are the same types of markers, and it's part of our history now. And that's another thing that has come full circle, is that these areas that might have been shunned years ago, now we have markers to recognize these unusual events. You know what? The Betty and Barney Hill case, actually, there's a marker in the White Mountains you can locate, which dedicates to that sighting as well. So so this is another area. This is another thing for people that you can get your picture taken next to the statue and then next to the marker, and it's part of way to embrace this hidden history. That Whitehall is famous for being one of the places that claims to be a birthplace for the U.S. Navy, and now it's the protective habitat of the Sasquatch. Back in early 2000, I was able to pass legislation. We passed it in the town and the village, which I wrote, to protect these creatures. And what it was a way to embrace the phenomena, to recognize the history, and to dedicate it to Professor Cook.
Oh, so that was you. Oh, okay. I remember hearing about that. I just didn't realize that was you that passed it. They just say, every time I try to, I hear something about this law that got passed oh my God, let me try this again. To protect Bigfoot in New York. They never say who wrote it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I had written it in 2002, 2003, and we passed it, I think, 2003 and 2004 with the board, the village board, and then the county. So, or not the county, the village and the rural area as well for Whitehall, New York. Village and town, I should say. And so what that was an extension of what Dr. Cook had tried to do. Dr. Cook tried to get these creatures placed on the Endangered Species Act. And being an academic, you got to remember, Dr. Cook was a Pulitzer Prize nominee for his Flood Tide of Empire, which was Yale published work. And so he was an academic heavyweight. And he tried to get this passed, and they actually proposed it when Madeline Kunin was governor. And it didn't pass, but it was an attempt. So this was an extension of what Dr. Cook tried to do. And we got it passed for Whitehall, for the town and the village, and we dedicated it to Dr. Cook's memory. And that was a way to dedicate, to pay tribute to Dr. Cook and his research. And it was also a way to recognize the history of this phenomena, which is often underreported and, was sort of the hidden history for this region. And we have a rich history in it. So, it was a win-win for the community, and that was when the legislation was passed right after we had some documentary crews come through.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad you were able to get it passed. But like I said, I mean, every time I read about that, I never could tell who was actually the one that brought about it. It just always just, this Bigfoot law got passed, blah, 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 but it never said anything else. But the fact that it's you, that's amazing. So kudos to you, Paul. Now, real quick to wrap things up, so I guess I'll just throw these last two questions into one to kind of help you out here. So, like we were stating before, your latest book is called The Mysterious Northwoods, that came out a couple years ago. So I guess my question is, are you and your brother working on anything currently, or are you? And then the last question pretty much is, how can people contact you for whatever, like reports, investigation?
Sure. Well, I'm on Facebook, and actually, if you go to my Facebook page, Paul Bartholomew, you will find I'll put on reports every now and then, video reports, and they will cover the history, particularly of this area, and research we've done. And one of the reports, probably in the top 10 of the recent reports posted on my Facebook page, is a summary of the Whitehall legislation. So you can see a 3-minute description of how that was done, and so forth. And I do that from my library here in Whitehall. And so if anybody needs to contact me, you can contact me right on Facebook, or you can get a hold of me at BFYeti1, and that's the number 1, at Yahoo. So it's BF as in Bigfoot, Yeti, YETI, the number 1 at yahoo.com. So that's another way to contact me, or just look me up on Facebook. That's easy enough to find as well. Now, we're always collecting information. We're always collecting reports. So it's a continual process. And yeah, I've got a book in the works right now, and my brother's got some other projects, some books coming out as well. So yeah, we are continually investigating and continually documenting and publishing whenever we accumulate enough.
That's awesome, Paul. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and for everybody else, keep your eyes open, because, well, in this case, you just never know if you're going to be driving your car and a Bigfoot walks out in front of you, or you're driving a car and you see bright random lights that are just chasing after you, which I hope do not do anything else besides just watch you from afar.